The Queen of a Distant Country by John Braine continued. You go with that Miranda Aberwick's lot, don't you? Sometimes, I said. My mother says she's a bad influence. There's a young man from our street, Jim Carmarthen. He's a cousin of mine. He had a good job at the town hall. He used to write poetry, silly stuff. I couldn't understand it. Mrs. Aberwick encouraged him. Is that bad? He threw up his job to go to London. So what? I'd never heard Miranda or anyone in the gang refer to Jim Carmarthen. I felt angry and jealous, but tried to keep my tone neutral. He was had up in court, that's what. Lucky not to go to jail. What did he do? She lowered her voice. Went with a girl, underage. Depends on the girl. Oh, she looked older than 14. The judge said so. You can't blame Miranda for that, anyway. His mother does. Says he changed completely when he started going around with Miranda's lot. He wasn't the same boy, anymore. I haven't heard of him. I bet you haven't. He doesn't come home anymore, ashamed to show his face. Who cares? He's not the only one, is he? His mother cares. The Carmarthens are big Methodists, you know. Look down on us because we don't go to chapel. Miranda's always been decent to me, I said. Jim Carmarthen would probably have gone to London anyway. What really bothered me was that I hadn't ever seen any of Jim Carmarthen's poetry. It didn't seem a very good omen for me. If one of her swans was a goose, another could be. You don't look very pleased, she said. I couldn't care less. But I couldn't care more. It had spoiled my whole evening. It meant that I couldn't trust Miranda again. I'd associated her with success, and now I associated her with failure. It's your own business, she said. I just thought I'd tell you. I wish you hadn't, I said. I looked away from her across the room and saw Ralph Thorolby and Ted Lewis. They were arguing in low voices. Then I noticed tears in Ralph's eyes, but put it down to the smoky atmosphere, which seemed actually to have become thicker since we'd come in. Ted turned away from Ralph and saw me. He waved and nudged Ralph, who waved too. They came over to our table. I was just going to ask you why you weren't at the cobble, Ralph said. But it'd be a silly question. He smiled at Cora. Cora Ramilton, I said. Ralph Thorolby, Ted Lewis. Pleased to meet you, she said. Ted looked vaguely contemptuous, but Ralph continued to smile. Pleased to meet you, my dear, he said. What good taste you have, Tom. He looked at his watch. We've just time for a quick one at the cobble, he said. Cheerio, Tom, and cheerio, Cora. Ted said nothing, but as he followed Ralph out, started arguing with him again. He's nice, the older one, Cora said. He speaks beautifully. She sounded rather wistful. Perhaps for a moment she was comparing her accent with the genuine article. He was right about my having good taste, I said. You're lovely. Really, you are. You're the best-looking girl in the room, by a long chalk. You say that to all the girls? I've never said it to any girl before, I said. It occurred to me that I was speaking the absolute truth, and what I kept detecting on the faces of the men around me was envy. It didn't matter about my trench coat and awful hat, or that I didn't have a car. I had something which they all wanted. This isn't the sort of feeling that any decent chap would admit to, but I've never pretended to be a decent chap. Half the pleasure I derived from Cora was from being seen with her. Looking back, I can't imagine what she saw in me. It wasn't that she was particularly impressed by my writing, although she was curious about how much I was paid for it. It's more likely that she thought of me as the heir to a flourishing small business and as a Conossington with all sorts of useful connections. I'm sure that she didn't want to be a fisherman's wife, just as I'm sure that she had social ambitions. The shorthand and typing classes were one means of rising. I believe that she had a vision of herself as the secretary who marries her boss. If I'd been her, I wouldn't have wasted my time with Tom Matfield, but contrived to put myself in the way of meeting young men of the boss class. I would have seen how valuable an asset my looks were. I don't think that she really did, at least not consistently. Part of her was searching for a rich husband. Part of her was searching simply for a man to love her. And I don't think that she wanted to leave Anglesey. Most people don't want to leave their hometown, particularly when their families, she belonged to one of the two main fishing families in Anglesey, have close links with the place. But I overcomplicate matters. The fact is, I see now that she fancied me. She needn't be ashamed to bring me home to tea. I'd always be able to support her, and I had no connection with the sea, about which she knew Kipling was right. It was the old grey widow-maker. That was a quotation which I'd heard her use more than once. Perhaps, too, she smelled success on me. The most unsophisticated of women are better at this than men. But I'm being unfair. Though obviously she had aspirations towards a higher status, I don't think that she was a calculating sort of person. None of this has very much to do with what followed during the next few months. At first, in the Victoria Park, a large hilly stretch of land northeast of the promenade, but for the most part in the living room at home. It could be bitterly cold in Anglesey in winter, but very few people used the park, and there was an abundance of shelters and trees, mostly conifers. At home, we always kept a roaring fire. There was nothing mean about my father and Hetty. But though they never returned until late, and never unexpectedly, I never felt quite certain that Amelia or Lester wouldn't come downstairs. The hero of my first novel, of course, had no such problems. The children in the house where he went babysitting with the rich man's daughter never stirred, and the older woman borrowed a friend's flat. In the sex manuals I used to read at that period, it was always pointed out how reprehensible and unsatisfying petting was, and how there was a grave danger of it making the real thing disappointing. It wasn't like that with me. I've pushed a great deal of what happened in my youth to the back of my mind, but I've never let go of any detail of what happened between Cora and me. It still was, in that part of England at least, a restrictive society sexually. The general assumption was that unmarried people shouldn't copulate. I don't in the least care whether this was a good or a bad thing in itself. The effect on me was to heighten sensuality, to make the most trivial and fleeting contacts with the opposite sex almost unbearably exciting. Naturally, I wanted the real thing, but every successive intimacy was complete in itself, something to be grateful for, something to be treasured. What I learned from Cora has stayed with me. I've never ceased to be grateful for women and the amazing and wonderful difference between them and us. I don't very clearly remember the interior of her home. The exterior was almost a duplicate of ours, except that along the tops of the terrace ran an absurd little crenellated parapet. There was a great deal of new-looking furniture and a great many ornaments and pictures and photos and a large, shiny radiogram, but no TV. The mother was a small, thin woman who talked very rapidly and always wore an apron. The father was a large, dour man with a big jaw and very hard hands. I had tea there 3 or 4 times, and Cora had tea at my house 3 or 4 times. I've tried to remember these occasions, but my usually reliable memory comes up with only a few snatches of conversation. I don't think that Cora's parents liked me very much. They probably felt that their only daughter could have done better for herself, and I don't blame them. My father and Hetty, on the other hand, didn't seem to care very much. Hetty praised her looks and laughed at her accent, and my father would ask me if I'd got it in yet. Cora said nothing about marriage, but I felt that I was going out with her under false pretenses. It didn't weigh on me overmuch. I have never had a very active sense of guilt. But once I saw what turn her mind was taking, I should have been honest with her. I wasn't in love with her. She was kind and uncomplicated and even-tempered, and I liked her, and that was as far as it went. It was her body that I loved, and gradually came to know as well as my own. The most important thing I was to learn from her was something which before I only knew in theory, that women enjoy sex as much as men. The first time we went to Victoria Park was one cold November night. We entered the park from a path at the side and walked along between the pines hand in hand. There was a full moon, and the trees looked black rather than green. It was very quiet in the park, and the crunch of our feet on the loose gravel seemed unnaturally loud. I was so excited that I found it hard to speak. She didn't speak, but her face was serene and faintly smiling. The path climbed steeply upwards. At the top was a large wooden shelter. "Let's sit down and have a cigarette," I said hoarsely. "I don't mind if I do." I offered her a cigarette. "Oh, what a cute little case," she said. "You've seen it before." I wondered what exactly she expected me to do this evening, whether she was hot stuff, all for it, whether she'd be able to tell that I was a virgin, and, almost simultaneously, whether she'd smack my face if I tried. We sat smoking for a while. I tried to blow smoke rings, but the breeze through a broken pane prevented them from forming. "It's nice here," she said. "About the only hill in the district." "I dreamed about you last night," I said. I had actually dreamed about being lost in London with someone pursuing me whose face I couldn't see. But how would she know? Was it a nice dream? "Very nice." "How nice?" "I can't tell you." "Naughty," she said, and gave me a little dig in the ribs. "You're a dreamy sort of boy, aren't you?" "I think about real things." "Such as?" "Everything, and what goes on inside people's heads." She threw her cigarette on the floor and put her foot on it, and snatched mine from my mouth. She moved closer to me and tilted up her face. "You're really quite shy, aren't you?" she whispered. She kissed with her mouth open and her tongue searching for mine. After a while I unfastened her topcoat and took off my own. I ran my hand down her back, feeling the outline of her slip and bra straps and the contrast in texture between wool and nylon. I suppose it was then that my taste in women was fixed. I haven't ever consciously limited myself to one type, but when I look back, most of the women in my life have been slim and dark, with a tendency to domineer. I didn't know this then, all my senses being in an uproar of delight, but I've realized it since. She really took charge that evening, and continued in charge. Hoping she would stop me, and hoping she wouldn't, I unbuttoned the top of her dress and felt her shudder. I put my hand under her bra, which was very tight. She reached up behind her, her lips still on mine, and did something. Her breasts swung forward into my hands. It was different from what I'd expected. The few nude photos I'd seen were so posed as to make the breasts seem as if held by an invisible brassiere, and the nipples were somehow minimized. Looking down at hers in the moonlight, I was for a second almost frightened. The nipples and the rings round them were so large, and, though small, they dropped a little with their own weight. I put my head on them. "Baby," she said, "baby," and then pressed my head down on them. That was as far as it went that evening, and as far as it was to go the next 5 times we were alone together. In the back of my head I had some idea of a gradual seduction. In the event, I let my instincts lead me. Each time what I had satisfied me, but not to satiation, and I would keep remembering it after, and all my perceptions, the smell of the sea, the texture of wood and cloth, the taste of apples in particular, were transformed, were both stronger and more delicate. I've made a mess of my marriage, and if I marry Deirdre, I expect I'll make a mess of that. And, of course, I was to make a mess of my relationship with Cora. I'm obviously not good husband material, and I won't go down in history as a great lover either. But with Cora I learned the beginning and the end of wisdom in love, which is to take it easy, to do what you want to do, not what you imagine is expected of you, not what the manuals sent under plain cover recommend. For what you want will in the end be what the woman wants, just as long as you're not trying to prove anything. I always knew this, though I couldn't then articulate it. And Cora must have too. And it must have helped that I'd grown away from all the boys I'd gone to school with. There was no one of my own age to talk to about Cora, to boast to about the successive stages of our intimacy. The end of that is a feeling of betrayal, the presence of invisible spectators egging one on to a kind of gang rape. I gave the hero of my first novel a best friend, with whom he compared notes on his sexual progress, but I've been saying this unavailingly ever since it was published. He wasn't me. He was rather more of the predator, the hunter. I, in my way, have always been Eros' adoring servant. A price had to be paid for all this. I began to neglect my writing. I even tried to write poetry. Cora liked it, though I suspect that she didn't understand it, and would rather that it had rhymed. It had few merits. I knew enough to avoid adjectives and cliches, and now and again would come up with a phrase which would come near to expressing what I felt. On one of my now rare visits to the Cobble, I gave some of the poems to Miranda. She said nothing at the time, but a week later phoned me. "Come to my house tonight, about 7. I'm not absolutely sure. I am, Ducky. I've spent a lot of time on you, and I'm not going to see it wasted." She hung up. My father glanced at me over his paper. "She's a right bossy boot, that one. She's helped me a lot. Very kind of her. Used to know a widow when I was your age. She helped me too." "It isn't like that," I said, irritated. "Wish it were. You're seeing a lot of that Cora these days. What's wrong with her? Nothing. She's a nice lass. But I know more about you than you think. Chaps like your cousin Morris. It suits them to be tied down early, but it won't suit you. I'm not going to be tied down. You better be bloody careful, then. Otherwise you'll be arse over tail into a right hornet's nest. You haven't mentioned marriage to her, have you? I shook my head. She will. You'll see. How do you know? Because I've been young myself, you silly bugger. He picked up his paper, then put it down again. Listen, you get into any trouble, you tell me, but why wait till then? You'd better go away now. You're throwing me out? Bloody thickhead. Of course I'm not. I'm thinking of what's best for you. What about the shop? Oh, I'll contrive to run it without you. I'll think about it. Please your bloody self. He picked up his paper again. He wasn't a man to waste words. If he'd been more persistent, if I'd been more communicative, then my life might have been very different. Certainly my first novel would have had a different plot, for it was at this moment that its shape was decided. Chapter 11. When I rang the doorbell of the Grange at 7 that evening, there was no sound. I knocked at the door, which stood a little ajar. The light was on in the hall, but the drawing-room and Max's den were dark. I knocked loudly for some 10 minutes, beginning to feel rather foolish. Had I misunderstood her? The conversation with my father had depressed me with its intimations of trouble ahead, and I'd glanced at a half-finished article before I'd set out and come to the conclusion that it would have to be rewritten. And this was the image of failure: a cold, damp night, a large, dark house, and knocking to no avail. Miranda came to the door, frowning. "Why the hell didn't you just come in?" she asked. "Why do you think I left the bloody door ajar?" "I'm sorry," I said. "Oh, I'm in a foul temper. That damn doorbell. It's supposed to have been repaired. Sod and rot. The bloody working classes. You too, mate." "What have I done?" She showed me into her study, a room at the back of the house, which originally had been the breakfast room. It was the sort of room which I should have liked for myself, with the 2 bookcases running almost from floor to ceiling, and the huge desk at the window. It was large enough to have space for everything needed for writing, and small enough to be cozy. There were 2 coffee tables, a large leather-covered sofa, and 2 large matching armchairs. I can't remember any ornaments or pictures, except for the small photograph of her 2 sons in school uniform, dark-haired and smiling, on her desk, and the large painting of herself when young, in a white evening dress above the fireplace. The fitted carpet was cream and thick, and the walls were almost of the same color. It was both luxurious and austere, and almost unnaturally tidy. With the fire in the large tiled fireplace roaring up the chimney, and the central heating turned up high, it was too warm for comfort. I now wore a belt and, before sitting in the chair which Miranda indicated to me, took off my jacket without being asked. Miranda took out the sheaf of poems from the desk. She pointed to the bottle of Hague on the table. "Help yourself, and pour me one." She sat down on the other chair, looking at the poems. I moved the other coffee table to her right side and put down her drink on it. I knew now exactly the size of drink she liked. There was a long silence. I asked myself why I never felt comfortable in the room, and decided that the answer was that it was a workroom in which no work had ever been done, but that when the shelves and desk had been put in, she had every confidence of doing good work there. The silence stretched itself out irritatingly. I didn't like the sensation of being under judgment. What have I done? What? What have I done wrong? You've wasted your time. This stuff is self-indulgent crap. It's feelings. What did Renee say? Renee was the name by which we now always referred to Rilke. Poems are not feelings. These we have soon enough. Exactly. Christ, you don't realize how lucky you are to know that at your age. Who cares about your bloody feelings anyway? What do they all boil down to? You want to screw this girl. Bloody good luck to you. But that isn't writing. Love's a legitimate subject for the poet. But you're not a poet, dear. This is tum-ti-tum blank verse with an original image thrown in now and again. You just haven't got it. You haven't the ear. I suppose Jim Carmarthen has, I said sulkily. I'd never brought up his name before. She looked startled. Yes, he's not as good a writer as you're going to be, but he's a poet and you're not. She drained her glass and held it out to me. I refilled it. Why didn't you tell me about him? You're jealous. You want to be the only pebble on the beach, don't you? To my surprise, I found tears coming to my eyes. You might have told me. Oh, you're typical. You're going to be a real stinker when you grow up. You want all the attention that's going, don't you? You're the only writer in the world, aren't you? Her tone was surprisingly tender and amused. Yes, I am. Who's Jim Carmarthen? Why didn't you tell me? I knew as I said it that I was behaving childishly, but I couldn't help it. The wonder is that no one told you before. People forget, of course. Anyway, why the hell should I tell you? It's not fair, I muttered. Not fair. Darling, I don't give a bugger. I get through my life by avoiding everything that's unpleasant. I'm a champion escapist. I've built my castle and pulled up the drawbridge. What happened to him? Booze, getting mixed up with Soho layabout. What happened to him? Booze, getting mixed up with Soho layabout. Just not being tough enough. Might be just a phase. Sometimes going to the bottom is just what a writer needs. Don't look at me like that. Is he still writing? How the hell should I know? I saw something of his in a scrotty little review a mate of mine brought me, but that was ages since. I told him not to go until he'd fixed himself up with a decent job. I told him and better told him. Haven't you seen him at all? I don't want to talk about him any more. It's you I'm concerned with. The new toy. She stood up suddenly and came over to me, breathing heavily. I want to hit you, you little bastard. Why do you suppose I bother with you unless it's because you've got something? And I don't want to see it wasted. You're chasing this illiterate slut now, and you're going to chase her right up to the aisle if you're not careful. Have you fucked her yet? Tell me the truth now. I shook my head. She stared at me. All right, but it's not for want of trying, is it? It's my business. That's not you speaking. It's your glands. You want to be a writer. Any fool can be a husband. That's not for you. Listen, you're not the marrying kind. Do you know how I know? Because I don't think I am. And you're like me. She ruffled my hair. The gesture was oddly soothing, devoid of any sexual connotation. We're always on our Todd, aren't we? You see, I manage with old Max because we've come to an agreement. I leave him alone and he leaves me alone, as long as I don't do it in the street and frighten the horses. And there's plenty of money. That makes things easy. One day you will have plenty of money if you do what I tell you, and then you will be free. I'll not get plenty of money from Vanguard and the Statesman, I said. You'll write a novel. Not yet. You're not ready for it. You'll write a lot of novels. Every damn thing you dream about, you'll have. You're tough enough, and you're cold enough, and you can see. But don't get entangled with anyone now. It's experience, I said. Then buy some French letters, for God's sake. Don't act out the business of being in love. It isn't for you. It's good enough for ordinary people. It isn't for you. You mustn't eat table d'hôte. It's a good enough menu for the rest of them, but you wait and have what you want. I'll get you the proper sort of job in London when the time comes. Just be patient. I like Cora, I said obstinately. I'm not thinking of marriage, but she is, dear. She held out her empty glass. She was drinking more quickly than ever I'd seen her, but she was showing no signs of it. I know about Cora. Ralph described her to me. I know the type. She's a shop girl, isn't she, and her father's a fisherman. My surprise must have shown on my face. She laughed. Yes, she said, mimicking the accent of the Gestapo man in war films. We have our ways of finding out. I poured myself another whiskey. You're enjoying yourself, aren't you, Miranda? You're very impudent, she said. I put her drink into her hand. You enjoy arranging other people's lives. She sat down. Her cream linen dress was a little shorter than usual, and as she crossed her legs, I saw what, at that age, I always automatically looked for. But there was no physical desire. I think that there was a point in the evening when I was at that stage, but I had passed it. Yes, she said, I enjoy it. C'est mon métier. With people who are worth it. It grows on you, Tom. It's my nearest approach to being involved. Is that so bad, being involved? The worst thing in the world for writers. Cast a cold eye on life, on death. Horsemen pass by. You've got to cast a cold eye, Tom. If you poke this girl, you've got to realize that it doesn't mean anything. She tapped the sheaf of poems. You're trying to kid yourself that it'll mean more than that. The act itself means a hell of a lot. It's about time you had a woman anyway, and it's nice that it should be prettied up a bit, that you should like the person, but don't get involved. The world's full of women, and you'll have your share of them. She looked at me appraisingly. Women will always like you. You like women, and that's rare in this bloody country. Max doesn't like women, you know. Oh, he's not queer. In and out, and slinks back to his own room. But he wouldn't mess about with a chap. He's in London now. Old school reunion. Having the hell of a time reliving the best days of his life. I just bet they were, too. Tell you what, love, I'm rather pissed. Another great pleasure. Got to be careful, though. It plays hell with the complexion. When Max is away, I generally contrive to get up to some little teeny bit of mischief. Don't suppose he'd notice it if I did when he was there, but it seems a waste of a golden opportunity if I don't do something. Hemingway padded in and licked her hand. He brought in with him a smell of grass and earth, but only the faintest, not unpleasant, doggy smell. "Sit," said Miranda, and he subsided suddenly beside the fire. "You don't have a dog, do you?" she asked. I shook my head. "It's just as well. You get involved with them, too. Sometimes I've just thought of clearing out, going back to London. But he wouldn't be so happy in London." She grinned, her face suddenly the face of the girl in the picture. "Well, it's as good an excuse as any." The fine lines returned to her face. "Jane likes you." "Jane?" "Jane Beddingham, you fool. She's engaged." "That's nothing to do with it. I may not write any more, but I've a pair of eyes in my head. She's been a wild one in her time. Couldn't you tell?" "How could I?" I was actually blushing. "Of course you couldn't. That's why you're not ready to write fiction yet. She's years older than me. That's the attraction, darling. Younger men aren't my cup of tea, but it's different with some women. Not that she's all that much older." "Harvey could be a nasty customer," I said. She moistened her lips. "You'll be playing with fire, but it's fun, you know. You'd be surprised how many people are gamblers, like those Irishmen who used to wager their heads or their balls when they'd run out of money." "Like Ralph?" Her eyebrows shot up. "You'd noticed. I'm not as stupid as I look. I think Ted's just rather flattered. No harm in it so far. You know, Ralph doesn't know which way he's going. At his age, it's ridiculous, really. But I have to live here, and I've got to consider Max's position to some extent. I don't think there's much you can do about it." You say that with some relish. You'd like there to be trouble, wouldn't you?" "It's all material." She was quite right. I had nothing against Ralph or Ted, but I would have welcomed the spectacle of disaster, just as professional soldiers welcome war. "Oh, I'm with you, dear. If I were in London now, I wouldn't lift a finger, but Engelsie's another kettle of fish." "Why, kettle of fish?" "Christ, I'm pissed." "It's getting late," I said. I knew that I ought to be observing her in detail. This was how a middle-aged woman got drunk, but another side of me didn't want to watch her. Found the spectacle too ugly, felt that to stay would have been a kind of betrayal. "It isn't getting late, but you better had go. I'll put on record soon, some nice doomy Wagner, I think, and get all tearful and guilt-laden and sorry for myself." I rose. "Good night, love." I kissed her forehead. It was very hot. "Remember, though, no more poetry. And watch your step with Cora." But a month later, while babysitting one evening, I didn't watch my step. I followed my instincts. Nor did I do anything about Jane. The opportunity didn't present itself. Nor did I stop writing poetry. I stopped showing it to Miranda. I did, however, stop writing tum-ti-tum blank verse. On the evening that I didn't watch my step with Cora, I found a Petrarchan sonnet assembling itself in my head at the moment I entered her. "Be careful," she said, and I found a place for the words in the sonnet at the same time as I reflected that I hadn't ever before, in all my reading, realized what the phrase meant. I was careful, groaning with pleasure on the floor, the heat of the fire on my loins, my face on her bare breasts. The pleasure stopped, but the sonnet continued. "I love you," she said. "I love you, too," I said automatically, and decided not to put that in the sonnet. There was no way of making it sound original. I don't remember any guilt, nor was I disappointed. The books were all wrong. Heavy petting, a rather coy expression, but one I find preferable to the strictly accurate term, had taught us painlessly about our bodies, had made the act of love easier, had made the loss of her virginity less painful. When we were dressed, she made a pot of tea, and we sat looking at the television like, as she put it, an old married couple. I believe that was a turning point. I could almost wish that I had asked her to marry me then. I'd just passed my 19th birthday, and 2 years wouldn't have been too long to wait. Or 21, according to Anglesey standards, too young to marry. Nor was she too old to change, too firmly rooted in Anglesey. Her accent, grotesque as it was, proved that she had aspirations to live in a different world from the one she was brought up in. But it would have made me a rather better human being, perhaps even a better writer, to have awakened with that face beside me during my youth. I might have understood more about women. I might have understood more about marriage. I might have understood more about love. I might have hurt fewer people, used fewer people. I have not been as promiscuous as most men in my position would have been. I've liked and respected most of the women I've been to bed with, but I can't escape the fact that I've never considered anyone's feelings but my own. I've had my passions. I've known what the coup de foudre really means, but the thunder was soon over. I've never done anything foolish on account of a woman. I've never, when it came to it, committed myself. I've looked upon other people as specimens all my life. It's only now, looking back at what really happened for the first time, that I can perceive it. In my work I perceive it despite myself, though I've covered my tracks so well that no one else has perceived it. Some, particularly those behind the Iron Curtain, have seen my first novel as an exposure of bourgeois morality, of the corruption of a capitalist society, but that was never further from my mind. My hero used the rich man's daughter as I used Cora, as I've used every other human being I've ever known, except perhaps Morris and Amelia. Once, when I went to the London Zoo with Morris and Maureen and their children, I saw a male and female and baby monkey huddled together, big-eyed and shivering. It was a rather cold day for me, and no doubt they huddled together simply for warmth. I'm inclined to coddle myself, and had read the weather forecast, and was protected against the weather by a sheepskin coat and fur-lined boots and a Norwegian oiled sweater and corduroys. It strikes me now as being a fair enough summing up of my relationship to other people, warmly wrapped up, outside the bars, on the outside looking in. This is a long way from that night in Anglesey by the roaring fire, drinking strong tea, exultant at being at last a man, at having proved myself. For that was the conclusion of the sonnet. I had passed the initiation test. I had joined the club. I knew at last what it was all about. I remember unlocking the door of the staircase. Though we always checked whether Lester and Amelia were asleep, one couldn't be too careful. And I remember going into the bathroom, looking down at myself with an amused pride. There was a mirror in the door of the white bathroom cabinet. I looked at my flushed face and wondered if people would be able to tell what had happened to me. It was a very neat and clean little bathroom, considering that there were 2 young children in the house. There were always clean towels on the heated towel rail, and the white-painted airing cupboard was always full of neatly stacked towels and linen. The walls were lime green with a pattern of fishes. The olive-green tiles on the lower half and the floor had been laid by my father, and Hetty had made the matching lime-green toweling curtains and WC cover and bath mat and the surround at the base of the WC. I remember washing my face and hands with palm olive and taking great pleasure in its scent, which at that moment seemed almost voluptuous. And I remember thinking of Cora's breasts and the dark mystery between her thighs, now a mystery no longer, and I remember her contorted face before the act itself. Yes, I remember. And I remember my father and Hetty coming home, not drunk, but cheerful, bringing in the smell of beer and tobacco and cockles and mussels and the cold night air. And I remember walking Cora home and kissing her good night on the doorstep. Yes, I remember. I remember all this and more besides. I walked home along the front, and a wind had sprung up and now and again drove salt spray in my face. I'm good at remembering. It has made me a name and brings me in £30,000 a year. But I do not remember feeling any love for her, only gratitude. My compliments to the chef, waiter for a superb dinner, and I do not remember mentioning marriage, nor did I ever once try to put myself in her shoes. The worst of it is that I don't think I've changed much since then. Chapter 12. During the month after that, we went to the cinema twice and to a dance at the Co-op Hall. Somehow or other, the opportunity to do anything more than snatch a kiss never presented itself. We didn't do any more babysitting. I can't pretend that I spent the whole month in a state of frustrated lust. I was now a man. I knew what it was all about, and more frequently than ever before, my body gave me involuntary relief. But the woman to whom I clung, shuddering in my dreams, wasn't Cora, but Jane Baddingham. It was like the story of the farmer who was asked which he preferred out of all the numerous sexual activities he indulged in, and who said, wet dreams, because you met a better class of person. What Miranda had said about her liking me had stuck in my mind, but I didn't see what was to be done about it until one night in late spring at the Cobble. It was raining hard, and I felt extraordinarily elated. For me, there's always excitement in the sound of the rain against the windows as much as the feel of it against my face. Even when my life has been at its most humdrum level, it has always seemed to me to promise that something was going to happen, that change was on its way. Miranda was already there when I arrived, talking to Ted Lewis, who appeared a little put out. I noticed for the first time how full his mouth was, and that when he pushed his hair out of his eyes, he did so with a curiously coquettish flick of the wrist. "He did ask me to have a word with you," Miranda was saying in a low voice. "Yes," said Ted. "My face doesn't fit, and no need to explain." No, no, darling. We all like you. She broke off. I kissed her on the cheek. Ted subsided in his seat, staring at his pint. I thought his eyes were wet, but didn't want to embarrass him. Not for the first or last time. I wanted to be invisible. No other members of the gang were there. I was earlier than usual. "Hello, darling," Miranda said to me. "You look very pink and healthy." I came along by the front. "You're early." I glanced at Ted. "I'll leave, if you like." She smiled. "You're getting very perceptive." "Isn't he, Ted?" "Too bloody perceptive," Ted said. His face was indeed the same type as Ralph's, but his skin was smooth, and, now that I examined it, olive rather than sallow. The shape was an oval, strangely Elizabethan, and Ralph's inclined towards the rectangular World War II pattern. "We're just discussing what Ted's going to do," Miranda said. "Now he's got his degree," Ted said in a high voice. "His lousy past degree. She talks to you at her house, Tom, but for me it's the cobble." His eyes definitely were filling with tears. "I'm going to wash my hands," I said, and went to the gents. It was a large gents, with 10 compartments. The brasswork and chrome were newly polished, and it smelled of carbolic. There was a wash-basin and roller towel and a mirror. After I'd used the urinal, I actually did wash my hands. The towel was newly laundered, and that was a small but definite pleasure to begin a promising evening. I combed my hair at the mirror. It was nearly due to be cut, and there was the beginning of a wave in it. Looking over my shoulder, I indented the wave. I smiled at my reflection in the mirror, a pleasant, open face with regular features and good teeth, no pimples, pink and white skin, almost a pretty boy. I scowled at my reflection and lit a cigarette. I did look a little like Jimmy Cagney, but not at all tough, and not at all like a writer. I shrugged my shoulders in a gesture learned from Charles Boyer and walked slowly back to the bar parlor. Ted's eyes had dried, and he seemed more cheerful, almost too much so. "Thought you'd fallen in," he said. He drained his pint. "Come on, let's get some ale in." I sat down beside him and rang the bell. Miranda handed me some silver. "Get me a large Scotch ducky. I'm without transport. The old jalopy's in dry dock, and Max has taken his to Sheffield. Sounds as if he were giving it a day out, doesn't it? So I may as well get the teensiest bit sloshed." I had never seen her look better. She had a scarlet jersey dress, a gold bangle and necklet, and sheer stockings, through which I could see the fine dark hairs. Her eyes were very bright, and her face was flushed, but not with rouge. Ted looked somehow depleted. It was too neat and hackneyed an image, but I couldn't help thinking of the legend of the vampire. He looked tired, as if some energy had drained away. Miranda didn't have that effect upon me, but perhaps I was the same kind of person. Jane Baddingham came in with Bill and Nina Abercorn, and instantly I forgot about everyone else. When last I'd seen her at 3 a.m. in a brass-railed double bed in the shelter at Victoria Park, to be specific, she'd been naked, with her dark hair a dark cloud down to her waist. To see her again and to know that she wouldn't disappear when I opened my eyes was an enormous pleasure, secret and wild, yet sound and measurable. She had a dark green button-through dress, which didn't really suit her, which almost succeeded in making her look drab and swarthy. But it was merely the camera part of me which saw this. The human being called Tom Metfield saw a woman whom he wanted and who, as he caught her eye, he was certain for a split second wanted him. I rose and kissed Nina and Jane. This was a gang ritual, and at that time and place very daring. It has now even reached the working classes, who then kissed socially only their wives or husbands, or relations or small children. Then, particularly to a boy of 19, it was enormously titillating. I sat down beside Jane. "Where's Harvey?" "Gone to a conference in bloody Edinburgh." "What a shame." She smiled. "Your hair's growing wavy." "It needs cutting." "Don't. It looks nicer like that. You're not a bloody convict, are you?" "I like your dress," I said. "I don't. It looked all right when I put it on, but now I'm sure I should never have bought the bloody thing. But darling Mummy was against it, so of course I had to be contrary. Do you ever do things like that?" "My mother's dead." She put her hand on mine. "I'm sorry, love.